Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. The smell hit first, thick copper and spoiled meat, and by the time Claire pushed open the glass door of the 24/7 gas and sip, her boots were already slipping in blood. It wasn't just a stain, it was a flood. Crimson smeared across the once shiny tile, thick enough to turn the welcome mat into something unrecognizable. The overhead fluorescents hummed too loudly, one of them stuttering in a nervous flicker, and somewhere, impossibly, the Slurpee machine hissed and burped, its cherry red syrup dripping down the nozzle like it, too, was bleeding. Claire's hand tightened on her flashlight, even though the store's lights were on. That habit never died, not in October, not in Agony's end, not when something felt this wrong. Christ, Helix muttered behind her, his voice low and ragged, not even trying to hide the disbelief. They both had seen blood before, car wrecks, the occasional drunk fight gone too far. But this? Claire swept the beam of her flashlight across the counter, her breath fogging in the cold air the open door let in. The beam landed on him, the cashier, or what was left of him. He was slumped against the cigarette display, his body folded like he'd been thrown there. His chest was ripped open, ribs cracked apart like snapped white sticks, and someone had scooped him hollow. His eyes were missing, the sockets raw and black like something had dug them out with spoons. Claire's stomach tightened. She'd been a cop long enough to keep her face still, but her fingers trembled around the flashlight. Helix stepped around her, one hand on his holster, his boots leaving deep red prints on the floor. He didn't speak, not yet. He just scanned the way only Helix did. Slow, careful, the silence around him like a loaded gun. The silence in here was wrong, too heavy. The humming of the cooler, the hum of the lights. No music, no TV behind the counter, no radio static. Claire's voice cracked the quiet. No cameras. Helix grunted. He didn't need to look. She was right. The mounts were there, wires snipped, but the cameras themselves? Gone. Claire crouched, boots squeaking on the wet floor. The coppery smell so strong she tasted it. She stared at the jagged wounds. Something feral had done this. Something that didn't just kill, it devoured. She swallowed hard, looked over her shoulder. Helix's jaw was tight, his face set in that way that said he was already thinking ahead. First homicide in Agony's end, Claire said quietly, the words barely more than a breath. Helix didn't answer. He just moved his light across the aisles, the beam cutting over toppled candy, a shelf of chips that looked like something had clawed through them. Something about that clawing made her skin crawl. The dispatch call came back in her mind, just a flash. Unit 7, respond to gas and sip, code 187. The voice hadn't even sounded urgent, like it couldn't quite believe what it was saying. Helix moved toward the back door, his footsteps steady. Claire followed, light skimming over the grimy glass freezer doors, catching her own reflection for a heartbeat before moving past. The back door hung open, a cold October wind pushed in, and somewhere beyond in the dark alley, something moved. Both of them froze. Not a cat, not the skitter of a raccoon, something slower, heavier. Helix's hand hovered over his gun. "Don't," Claire whispered. The alley stayed still. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind through the cracked door, and then, faint but clear, a wet sound, like something dragging across the asphalt. Helix stepped forward, gun drawn now, his breath showing in the cool air. Claire stayed back, eyes flicking to the cashier's body, back to the door, the unease digging into her like a splinter. Whatever had done this, it wasn't gone. And for the first time in her career, Claire felt it, that sharp animal edge of fear. Something in Agony's end had changed. And tonight it started with blood on the tiles. By the time Claire and Helix dragged themselves back to the station, the air inside felt wrong, too warm, like someone had turned up the heat just to make the blood on their uniforms cling. Chief Dalton was leaning back in his cracked leather chair, cigar stub clenched between his teeth like it was the last thing tethering him to calm. His white hair stuck out under his cap, and his tie was always one tug from coming off. He looked up when they walked in, his sharp gray eyes scanning them before they even spoke. "Well," Dalton muttered, "you two look like hell." "Gas station," Claire said, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Her voice was dry, almost casual, but her pulse hadn't slowed since the alley. Dalton frowned. "I heard. We've never had—" He stopped himself, chewing the cigar, as if saying first homicide ever out loud would make it worse. Mags, sarcastic enough to turn any sentence into an insult, stood leaning on the coffee pot like she was holding it hostage. "Guess Agony's end isn't so boring anymore, huh?" "Boring was nice," Helix muttered. Benny, the rookie, wide-eyed, jittery, barely out of academy, snapped his gum and tried to act like he wasn't rattled. Maybe it was like a bear attack. "In a gas station?" Claire shot back. Benny shrugged. "Bears get hungry." Even Dalton snorted. The laugh felt wrong, thin, but it loosened the tension for half a second. They traded more words, jokes that didn't quite land, and for a moment it almost felt normal. The sarcasm, the bitter humor that made night shifts bearable, but the copper tang on their clothes and the way Helix kept clenching and unclenching his fists said otherwise. By the time they signed off shift, the whole station smelled like stale coffee and dread. Helix's house was dark when he unlocked the door, and for once, it felt unfamiliar. He lived simply, no clutter, no extra furniture, just the things he needed. Heavy weights by the wall, a single couch, a TV that mostly played static because he never remembered to pay for cable. Tonight it felt wrong. He kicked off his boots, listening. The house should have been silent except for the wind outside, but it wasn't. There was a sound. Soft, wet, like something sliding across the hardwood. Helix froze in the doorway. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, dragging. He reached for his gun. "Hello?" His voice was too loud in the empty house, echoing back at him. No answer, just another faint slide. Helix flicked on the hallway light, gun up, every muscle in his body coiled tight. He stepped forward, and that's when he saw it. A human eye, fresh, wet, rolling slowly across his floor. It blinked. Helix's breath caught. He aimed his gun without thinking, heart slamming against his ribs. The eye twitched, shifted direction, rolled closer to him. "What the hell?" he whispered. He could see every vein, every detail, the iris dark, the pupil dilating as if it were looking at him, and then it stopped. Not because it couldn't move, but because it chose to. Helix backed up one step, phone in his other hand before he even realized it. Claire answered on the second ring, her voice thick with exhaustion and caffeine. "What's wrong?" "You need to get over here, now." 10 minutes later, her patrol car screeched into his driveway. She came through the door without knocking, hand on her holster, scanning the room. "What the—" Helix pointed to the floor. The eye was gone, just a faint wet smear across the wood where it had rolled. "Helix," Claire said carefully, like she was talking to a spooked animal. "You didn't sleep yet, did you?" "I'm not hallucinating," he snapped. His voice was tight, harsher than he meant. It was here, a damn eye, moving on its own. Claire looked at him for a long beat. Then she holstered her gun, stepped closer, and put a hand on his shoulder. "I believe you," she said. And somehow that was worse. That night neither of them slept. They sat in Helix's kitchen, Bogey sprawled across Claire's lap like nothing was wrong, the dog's warm weight the only normal thing left. The clock ticked too loud, the coffee tasted burnt, and every creak of the house sounded like something sliding closer. By dawn, they were still awake. By dawn, they both knew. The murders weren't the worst thing in Agony's end. Whatever had done this, it was moving, it was watching. And they weren't ready for what came next. The call came just after 2 a.m. Claire and Helix were sitting in their patrol car, parked under the flickering sign of Joe's Donuts and Coffee, both clutching mugs that had been refilled too many times. Bogey had been walked, the caffeine jitters had set in, and for a brief second it felt almost normal. The kind of quiet, late-night lull they both pretended they liked. Then Dispatch's voice crackled through tight, thin, already shaking. "Unit 7, we've got another one." No address, no details, just that hollow tone that made Claire's throat tighten. They pulled up to a pale green house at the edge of Agony's end, the kind of house with garden gnomes and faded Halloween decorations still taped to the windows. The front door hung open. Helix's hand brushed the grip of his gun as they stepped inside, boots creaking on the hardwood. The smell hit them like a fist. Copper, decay, something wrong. Claire's flashlight beam moved first, across picture frames, the smiling faces inside, the little crocheted blanket on the couch, until it landed on the woman. She was sprawled across the living room floor, a jagged tear splitting her from sternum to hip. Her chest wasn't just hollowed, it was sprouting. Eyes, dozens of them. They clung to her like barnacles, growing out of her skin in clusters, wet, blinking, some looking at Claire, some at Helix, some at nothing at all. Claire's breath came shallow. One of the eyes, new, raw, still veined in red, blinked at her. "Jesus," Helix muttered, voice rough, cracking just enough to let the fear in. Claire crouched, fighting the urge to step back, to leave, to run. Her fingers trembled as her flashlight passed over the body, over the couch, over the floor where more eyes had rolled, tiny wet trails behind them. Helix's boot caught something. He looked down. An eye detached from the body blinked up at him. He crushed it before he thought about it. The sound, a sickening pop. Claire flinched. By the time backup arrived, the house felt too full. Chief Dalton, Mags, even Benny, who looked one joke away from throwing up. Dalton stood in the doorway, cigar dangling from his teeth like it was the only thing keeping him sane. "What the hell am I looking at?" "Eyes," Mags said flatly. "A lot of them." Benny tried to laugh. It came out as a hiccup. Maybe it's like some weird medical thing." Helix didn't answer. He just stared at the woman, his jaw locked so tight it might crack. Claire felt the weight of it too, the change. The first murder had been horror. This one was wrong, like the town itself was infecting. They stayed until dawn, writing reports they didn't believe, sipping bitter coffee they couldn't taste. By the time they left, the sun was just a pale smear behind gray clouds, and Agony's end looked quieter than ever, like it was holding its breath. Claire leaned against the patrol car, the cold biting through her jacket. "You ever feel like we're being..." She paused, searching for the word, "watched." She paused again and added, "no pun intended." Helix's eyes scanned the street, the houses, the windows, the shadows between them. "Yeah," he said finally. And in that moment, Claire swore she saw it, just for a split second. Something at the end of the street, tall, still, a cluster of eyes staring from the dark before they vanished. The town didn't scream yet, not yet, but panic was coming. They could feel it like a storm pressing in, and they knew the storm wouldn't stop. The next evening, Agony's end felt wrong in a way Claire couldn't name. The town wasn't panicking out loud yet. No screaming crowds, no torches and pitchforks, but the silence had shifted. Windows stayed shut, storefronts pulled blinds early, even the neon open sign in Joe's Donuts and Coffee sputtered like it was scared to stay lit. Claire and Helix rolled slow through the neighborhood in their patrol car, coffee between them, Bogey's fur still clinging to Claire's jacket. Neither spoke much. The easy sarcasm they usually traded had dulled under the weight of the last 48 hours. 2 murders, 2 impossible crime scenes, and that creeping sense of being watched. It hung over them like smoke they couldn't wave away. They pulled into their street just before midnight. Their houses, side by side, looked comforting in theory. 2 neat little single-story homes with porches and hedges. But tonight, even their street felt off. The trees leaned too far into the road, branches twitching in the cold wind. A single porch light down the street flickered, casting weird, jerking shadows. Claire grabbed her gear from the trunk. Helix locked the car, and then a voice came from behind them, warm, friendly, almost too normal. "Evening, officers." They turned to see Mr. Williams. He stood on his porch across the street, wrapped in an old flannel and wool slippers, holding a plate covered with foil. His gray hair stuck out like he'd combed it with his fingers, and his smile was the kind of smile that made you want to trust him. The man was Agony's end in human form, the kind neighbor who shoveled driveways without asking, watered plants when folks were on vacation, and waved every time you drove by. "Long night?" he asked, lifting the plate slightly. "Brought cookies. Thought you might need something sweet after..." He didn't say after all that blood. He didn't have to. Claire managed a smile, thin, tired, but real. "Thanks, Mr. Williams." Helix took the plate, muttering something like "appreciated" under his breath. Williams tilted his head, his smile never slipping. "You two catch that thing yet?" Claire blinked. "Thing?" He nodded toward the street, toward the world beyond. "Whatever's doing it. Something's out there, isn't it?" The way he said it, soft, certain, sent a flicker of unease down Claire's spine. Helix cleared his throat. "We're working on it." Williams chuckled lightly, almost kindly. "Well, I hope you catch it soon. Folks around here deserve to feel safe." He paused. "And I'd hate to see anything happen to you two." They chatted a bit longer, light talk, the kind of neighborly banter that should have been comforting. He asked about Bogey. Claire promised she'd bring him by, but as they walked back to their houses, Helix holding the cookies, neither spoke. Not until they were on Claire's porch and she turned to him. "Did that feel..." She searched for the word. "A little off to you?" Helix frowned, looking down at the cookies like they'd suddenly gone sour. "He's just being neighborly," Helix said finally, though his tone didn't fully convince himself. Claire nodded, but the unease stayed. Later, alone in her house, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay in bed with Bogey curled at her feet, the house creaking softly. Through her curtains, she could see Mr. Williams' porch light, still on, still glowing. She thought, just for a second, she saw movement behind his curtains. Like a shadow that wasn't quite the right shape. By the time midnight settled again over Agony's end, the quiet had turned suffocating. Claire and Helix's patrol car crawled through back roads slick with October mist, headlights cutting through sheets of low fog. The dashboard clock blinked 12:37 a.m. in cold green numbers. Neither of them spoke much anymore. Every time they tried to make a joke, the words just died. The dispatch crackle had been busy all night, strange noises, possible prowlers, something screaming in the woods. But when they arrived at each call, nothing, like the town itself was swallowing the evidence. They turned down Old Birch Lane, a stretch of road nobody liked. Trees bent low over the asphalt, their limbs black veins against a starless sky. The fog hung thicker here, turning the patrol car into a floating bubble of light. Claire sipped coffee that had long since gone bitter and cold. "This road always creeps me out," she muttered, voice tight. Helix's fingers drummed the wheel. "It's just a road." "Yeah," she said, staring out the window. "A road where things feel wrong." The first sound was faint, just a soft crunch somewhere beyond the trees. Helix's foot eased off the gas. Another sound, closer, like something large moving in the dark, the branches swaying as though something far too heavy brushed past them. Claire sat up straighter, hand hovering near her sidearm. "Hear that?" Helix didn't answer, just killed the headlights. The world went black. Fog wrapped around the car like a living thing. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, no sound. Then a scrape. Metal. Something dragged its claws, or something like claws, across the side of the patrol car. Claire's breath hitched. She swung her flashlight to the window, but the beam hit only missed. Helix's jaw tightened. He threw the car into park, hand already on his gun. "Wait," Claire hissed. Too late. He was already out, boots hitting the pavement with a solid thud. The fog outside was thicker than it looked from inside, swallowing him in seconds. Claire shoved her door open, the night air knifing cold. The scraping sound came again, this time from the other side of the car. She swung around, gun drawn, scanning the fog. "Helix?" His voice came back, low and sharp from somewhere ahead. "Claire, don't move." She froze. Something was moving in the fog, not a silhouette of a man, not an animal. Something wrongly shaped. Dozens of small gleams floated in the mist, like drops of dew, until Claire realized they weren't drops. They were eyes. Hundreds of them blinking in the dark, all fixed on her. The shape moved closer, too tall, too wide, like a nightmare pressed through fog. Helix's figure appeared, his flashlight beam slicing through the mist. "Get in the car," he barked. Claire didn't argue. She backed up fast, slammed her door just as the thing lunged from the fog, its outline only visible for a split second, long enough to see teeth, claws, a cluster of moving, blinking eyes. Helix dove in the driver's side, tires screaming as the car fishtailed and tore down Old Birch Lane. For a long stretch, neither of them said anything. They just drove, lungs burning, hearts hammering, until the fog thinned and the town lights appeared. Only then did Helix speak, voice flat and rough. "We almost didn't make it." Claire stared straight ahead, gripping the dash like it might fly out from under her. She didn't respond, because in that moment something clicked in her chest. This wasn't just some killing spree. This thing wasn't just attacking. It was hunting them. Agony's End. General Hospital was the kind of hospital that always smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and loneliness. It sat on the edge of town, surrounded by cracked parking lots and one dying oak tree that looked like it had been struck by lightning decades ago. Hospitals already made Claire uneasy. She'd said once, half joking, "It's the only place where you hear beeping and hope it doesn't stop." But tonight, the hospital felt like it was holding something back. Chief Dalton had called them at dawn. His voice had been clipped off somehow, like he couldn't decide if he should tell them over the phone. They brought in a body, he'd said, but it's changing. That was all, no more detail. Now Claire and Helix were in the basement of the hospital, following a nurse down a hall, too white, too clean, too bright. The morgue door creaked open, and the cold slapped them first. Dr. Renner stood beside a metal table, arms folded tight, his surgical mask pulled down around his chin like he'd given up on protocol. He wasn't the joking type, never had been, but tonight his face looked like it had been carved out of stone. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice low. "What's going on?" Helix asked, his voice the gruff, businesslike tone he used when he didn't want anyone to hear the unease underneath. Renner just motioned to the table. The body was covered with a sheet. Claire expected another crime scene echo, slashes, missing eyes. She didn't expect the movement. The sheet rose and fell, subtly but unnaturally, like something was shifting under the skin. Renner hesitated, then pulled the sheet back. It was a woman, mid-30s, pale skin, waxy in the morgue light. She should have been still. But she wasn't. Her skin was crawling, not like a metaphor, like something inside her was pushing out. Claire leaned closer, and her breath caught. Eyes, small ones, just forming, bulged beneath her skin like tumors. One had burst through her cheek, blood still dripping from where it clawed its way out. Another forced its way through the side of her neck, blinking sluggishly in the harsh light. Helix swore softly, stepping back. Renner's voice was flat, clinical, but Claire could hear the tremor. She was attacked. Same tearing wounds, same missing organs, but she didn't die right away. Claire's mouth felt dry. "What are you saying?" Renner hesitated. "It appears that if they don't die fast enough," he said finally, "it doesn't just kill them, it infects them." The woman's lips parted. Her throat made a wet, horrible sound, half breath, half gurgle. And then she spoke. Not words, not really, just broken syllables that scraped out like something inside her was moving her mouth. One of the new eyes on her shoulder blinked. Another one burst open on her arm, blood running like a crack in porcelain. Claire couldn't breathe. Helix reached for his gun, not to shoot her, but because it was instinct. Renner stepped back fast, his face suddenly pale. "She's not stable. We don't know." The woman convulsed, her back arched, eyes splitting through her skin like blooming flowers. Her face twisted, the human shape almost gone, and then she screamed, not the scream of a victim, the scream of something becoming. Helix moved before Claire could. One clean shot, merciful, ended it. The scream cut. The room went silent except for the sound of their breathing and the drip of blood from the table onto the cold floor. No one spoke for a long time. Then Claire whispered, voice shaking for the first time since the gas station. "If it touches you and you don't die fast enough." Helix's jaw clenched. "You become it." They left the morgue with that truth heavy between them. The infection wasn't just killing, it was building an army. The knock came just past midnight. Claire was on her couch, Bogey curled against her leg, the muted hum of the TV filling the silence. She wasn't watching it. She couldn't watch anything anymore, not without thinking about eyes. The knock came again, slow, deliberate. She reached for her gun. Through the peephole, she saw Mr. Williams, still in that same old flannel, his gray hair mussed like he'd just woken up. He smiled when she opened the door, holding up a casserole dish like this was just another neighborly visit. "Evening, Claire," he said, voice warm, gentle. Thought you might like something hot. You've been working so hard." Something in her stomach turned. Helix's patrol car wasn't in the driveway. He'd gone home to grab fresh clothes, maybe sleep an hour or two before another night shift. It was just her and Mr. Williams. "Thanks," she said carefully, hand still on the door, her other on the holster she hadn't let go of since the morgue. William's smile didn't falter. "You've been through a lot," he said, his tone like honey, "but I want you to know." He stepped a little closer. "I've been here all along, watching over you." Claire's pulse spiked. The porch light above them flickered. For a second, his shadow stretched, too long, too thin, like the shape of a man trying to hold something much bigger inside. Bogey growled low, a sound she'd never heard from him before. William's eyes flicked down to the dog, and for the briefest heartbeat, they weren't gray anymore. They were black, glossy, unblinking. Claire stepped back. "Mr. Williams," she said, voice flat, tight, "what's on your shirt?" He glanced down. The cuff of his sleeve had slipped just enough for her to see it. A dark smear of dried blood. The casserole dish hit the porch, porcelain shattered. And when he looked back up, he wasn't smiling anymore. Something in him snapped. His back arched, spine cracking like gunshots. His skin rippled like something under it was pushing out, and then his face split. Not like a mask, like his head was peeling apart, opening to reveal the thing inside. Eyes, hundreds of them, swarmed across his skin, blinking, rolling, watching, his teeth stretched into rows of jagged white shards, his mouth widening far past anything human. His hands tore through his flannel, fingers splitting into claws. Claire didn't scream, she didn't even think. She ran. Bogey barked once, sharp, vicious, as Claire slammed the door and grabbed her radio. "Helix! Helix!" Static, then his voice breathless. "I'm here. I heard it. Stay inside." Too late. Glass shattered behind her. Mr. Williams wasn't outside the house anymore. He was inside. The thing that had worn his skin crouched in the living room, filling the space like a nightmare pressed into reality, towering, twisting, a mass of blinking eyes and too many teeth. "Claire," it rasped, and the voice was wrong, human syllables spilling from something that wasn't human anymore. "You should have stayed close, safer that way." She fired. 1, 2, 3 shots. Bullets tore through flesh, but it wasn't flesh anymore. It laughed, not a laugh like joy, a laugh like cracking bones. Helix hit the front door like a battering ram, gun drawn, flashlight beams slicing through the nightmare. "Move!" he barked, and Claire dove aside just as the thing lunged. The fight was chaos. Bullets, claws, furniture splintering under impossible strength. Bogey darted under the table, teeth bared, barking wildly. Williams moved like smoke, fast, wrong, everywhere at once. Every time Claire or Helix shot, more blood sprayed, more eyes opened. Helix was nearly grabbed, claws raking the air inches from his throat. Claire fired again, and this time it stumbled, just for a second. But a second was enough. Helix grabbed the fire poker from Claire's hearth, swung with all his strength, and drove it into Williams's chest. The thing shrieked, a high, piercing sound that shattered the air. Its eyes, all of them, snapped shut at once, and then it fell. For a long moment, there was only silence. Claire stood frozen, gun still up, chest heaving. Helix's breath came in ragged pulls, his hands slick with blood that wasn't his. Bogey crept out from under the table, whining low, tail tucked. The thing that had been Mr. Williams lay crumpled on the floor, eyes still twitching, mouth still gaping wide like it had one more thing to say. Helix stepped closer, poker raised. "Stay down," he muttered. But Williams didn't move. Not really. Only one thing did. An eye, freshly grown, opening slowly on the back of his neck and staring straight at them. By morning, the body was gone, not missing, not in the way the other bodies had been. The coroner's van came, bags were sealed, procedures followed, but the way Claire and Helix stood on her porch, blood still drying in streaks down their arms, felt like they hadn't won anything because it didn't feel over, not even close. The street looked normal in the cold gray daylight. Children's bikes leaned against fences. Wind chimes clinked lazily in the October breeze. Someone was raking leaves a few doors down. No one screamed. No one asked why the front door of Claire's house hung from one hinge, or why the porch was slick with drying blood. In Agony's end, people were starting to learn not to ask. Inside, the living room was a crime scene. Furniture shredded, bullet casings scattered across the rug. The floor where Mr. Williams had fallen was a map of blackened blood and tiny ruptured eyes. But his body, already zipped up, already gone. Helix sat on the edge of Claire's couch, silent, his shoulders tight and square. His knuckles were bruised, blood crusted under his fingernails. Claire stood by the window, Bogey pressed against her leg like he was guarding her. Neither of them had spoken much since the thing on her living room floor stopped moving. Finally, Helix said, "Do you think that was all of it?" Claire didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted to Mr. Williams' porch across the street. The porch light was still on. It hadn't flickered out. The hospital called an hour later. The nurse's voice was too calm, the kind of calm people use when they don't want you to hear the truth. "We've had incidents, unrelated, probably nothing, but more patients are showing symptoms. Eyes. By noon, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, but the light felt wrong, too thin, too cold. Claire and Helix walked the neighborhood, Bogey trotting between them, and saw it everywhere. Little glints on sidewalks, in gutters, on fences, a single eye blinking from the hollow of a tree before rolling into the leaves. At the morgue, a drawer clicked open on its own. A body inside twitched once, then an eye opened slowly on its cheek. By dusk, Agony's end looked exactly the same as it always had. Quiet, sleepy, safe, but Claire knew better. She stood at her window, coffee cold in her hand, Bogey growling low at nothing she could see. Helix sat on his porch across the way, gun across his lap, staring at Mr. Williams's empty house. The two of them locked eyes through the dark. Neither waved, neither smiled, because they both felt it. They both knew Mr. Williams was dead, but the eyes weren't done. Somewhere in town, a school hallway sits empty. A janitor's bucket is tipped over, water pooling under the lockers, and just above it, high on the wall where no one should be able to reach, a fresh, wet eye blinks open,